Love, lies, and deception, the heartbreaking story of my toxic relationship. Never did I imagine that my thirst for love would lead me to the drought of deceit. But there I was, entangled in the arms of a man whose heart was a locked chest of secrets. Welcome to Willow Creek, a place where the shadows whisper and the truth hides in plain sight. I am Anna, and this is the story of how my search for a soulmate led me to the darkest corners of love and lies. It's a tale that delves deep into the intoxicating, often painful, dance of desire and deception. A journey that took me from the heights of passion to the precipice of despair. As you step into my world, be prepared to walk the tightrope of morality, to feel the heat of forbidden trysts, and to confront the cold aftermath of a love built on illusions. If sin had a flavour, it tasted like our first kiss, stolen under the moonlit shadow of the willow tree, promising a forbidden saga of heartache. It started with a spark, an innocent flirtation that ignited a blaze I couldn't control. His name was Michael, and he was like a melody that I couldn't stop humming, a rhythm that set my world dancing to a dangerous beat. We were reckless, we were fire, and we thought we were invincible. But as we wove our web of midnight whispers and hotel room confessions, the first threads of an inevitable unravelling began to show. This is the beginning, the first chapter of my fall, and the moment I awoke to a love that was as intoxicating as it was toxic. Chapter 1. Shocking love, triangle, MyTorrid affair with a cheating husband. You wouldn't believe me if I told you how it all started. The kind of thing you think only happens in those tattered paperbacks with the worn spines and dog-eared corners, sitting on the shelf of a quaint little bookstore in a forgotten lane. But here I am, sipping my third cup of coffee, staring out the window at the drizzle that makes everything look like an impressionist painting, and I can't help but laugh. It's not a happy laugh, mind you. It's the laugh of a woman who's seen the curtain pulled back on a magician's act. His name was Michael, and he was the storm that broke the drought of my life. I met him at the most unexpected place, the annual fair. He was leaning against the candy floss stall, with a smile that could coax a cat off a fish wagon. We got to talking, you know, the kind of light chat that you do when you're just passing the time, not expecting it to lead anywhere. He was charming, with a capital C. The man had a way with words that would make a poet toss their quill into the river and give up. I laughed more in that 15 minutes than I had in the last 15 days. And when he asked for my number, I gave it to him without a second thought. That's what you do when life throws you a bone, right? You grab it. I wasn't naive. I saw the tan line on his ring finger. But he spun me a tale of a loveless marriage, of being on the road to being single again, and like a fool, I believed it. Or maybe I wanted to believe it because when he looked at me, I felt like I was the only one in the world. Our affair was a whirlwind. It was stolen moments, passionate embraces, the kind that make you forget your morals and the life you had planned for yourself. We were reckless, but isn't that just another word for alive? Every message, every secret meeting, I felt it in my bones. This was something. It was wrong, but it was something. We'd meet at the edge of town in the little motel that smelled of pine cleaner and sawdust. It was our world, a bubble where nothing else existed. No responsibilities, no consequences, just us and the lie we wrapped around ourselves like a warm blanket. But as the leaves turned golden and began to fall, so did the facade. I started to see the cracks. The late-night calls he'd step out to take, the sudden trips out of town, the way his gaze would dart away when I talked about the future. I should have seen it, should have known that you can't build anything that'll last on a foundation of whispers and secrets. Then came the day that changed everything. The day she called me. Beth, his wife, his real wife. Not the figment of a failing marriage he'd painted for me, but flesh and blood, anger and pain, betrayal and vengeance. The phone call was like a slap, sharp and stinging, a wake-up from the dream I'd been living. She was furious, and who could blame her? Her husband, my lover, the magician with his tricks, had been playing us both. And oh, how well he played. She told me things I wish I could unhear because ignorance is bliss, isn't it? But once the truth is out, it's like a bell that can't be unrung. She told me about their life, their kids, their plans, all intertwined like the ivy on an old oak tree. And there I was, the axe trying to split it apart. The call ended with a threat, one I took seriously. Beth wasn't a woman scorned. She was a hurricane ready to reclaim her land, and I was nothing but a beach house in her path. Now, as I sit here, I wonder what's to come. I've got a choice to make, a path to choose. Do I keep living this half-life, a shadow in someone else's story, or do I walk away? Do I risk the storm, or do I seek shelter from the lies and the deceit? I know what I should do, but what I'll do, well, that's a story for another day. For now, let's just say, the storm's not over yet, and I've always loved the rain. This is chapter 1 of a 6-part short story. If you don't have time to watch or listen to all 6 chapters right now, why not subscribe to the Romance Diaries on YouTube and check back later, or simply stay tuned for chapter 2. Imagine the shock, a cold splash of reality when the other woman calls you. That's how I learned about the true cost of our stolen moments. Beth's voice, his wife's voice, was a serrated blade through the fabric of our affair. She knew. Oh, she knew everything, and in her knowing, I saw the reflection of my own folly. This chapter is the unravelling, the raw, messy confrontation of a dream turning into a nightmare. I was to meet her, face the scorn of a woman betrayed, and in doing so, gaze into the mirror of my own betrayal. It was the end of the illusion, the dissolution of the mirage, and the harsh light of truth was about to dawn. Chapter 2. Caught in a love lie, his wife's revenge on our steamy affair. You know, there's a kind of silence that falls when the last piece of a puzzle slots into place. It's not peaceful, it's heavy, loaded with the weight of reality that you've been dodging like raindrops in a storm. That's the silence I was wrapped in, sitting there in my kitchen, the hum of the refrigerator suddenly sounding like a roar in my ears after Beth's call. I'd hung up the phone, but her words were still buzzing in my head, a swarm of bees I couldn't quiet. "You didn't know?" she had asked, her voice a cocktail of anger and satisfaction. "Well, now you do." And just like that, she'd painted my world in stark black and white, the colours of our affair bleeding away to nothing. I thought of Michael, of us, and felt the sting of tears, not just for what we'd had, but for what I'd been to him. A diversion, a plaything, someone to while away the time with while his real life, his wife and children waited just out of sight. How had I let myself become that woman, the other woman? I think back to the woman I was before him, the one who had principles, who would have turned her nose up at someone like me now. Michael had said all the right things, pushed all the right buttons. But that's what con artists do, isn't it? They find your weaknesses, and they exploit them. But it wasn't just about him and me. There were kids involved, kids who didn't ask for any of this. And Beth, she was a force to be reckoned with. Her next call wasn't just a call, it was a battle cry. She wanted to meet, face to face, woman to woman, not to sling mud, though God knows we both had our share to throw, but to... What? What could she possibly want from me now? I agreed to meet her, against the better judgment of my friends. "Are you crazy?" they asked. "You owe her nothing." But that wasn't true. I owed her the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, as raw and as painful as it would be. So there I was, waiting at a park bench, the kind of place where you'd expect to see children playing or old couples walking hand in hand, not the kind of place for clandestine meetings and sordid tales. But life has a funny way of upending expectations. Beth was punctual, a quality I couldn't help but respect. She walked up to me, no tears, no drama, just a woman with a purpose. She sat down, and we talked. It wasn't the conversation I expected. There was no screaming, no accusations, just the quiet, devastating recounting of two lives intertwined with a man who was a master of deception. The sun began to set, and the park started to empty, the day's laughter fading into the twilight. Beth stood up to leave, but not before she handed me an envelope. "I thought you should see these," she said, "before you make up your mind about what kind of man he really is." I watched her go, her figure becoming just a shadow in the fading light, and there in my hands I held the weight of her world, the proof of Michael's betrayal. Photos, letters, a veritable museum of a life built on lies. It was my turn now, my move in this chess game I never wanted to play. As I walked home, the envelope heavy in my bag, I knew what I had to do. I had to end it with Michael, cut the last string that tied us together. But it wouldn't be easy. Love, even a love built on lies, has a way of digging its roots deep into your heart. And as I turned the key in my lock, stepping into the silence of my own making, I wondered, would I be strong enough to say goodbye? Or would I be swept up in the storm of him once more? This is Chapter 2 of a 6-part short story. If you are enjoying this story, please show us some love by hitting the like button. Please stay tuned for Chapter 3. The world stopped spinning for a moment, the moment his wife's fury came crashing through the phone line. "Another one like you," she spat, her words a tempest laced with venom and vindication. I was not alone in my shame, nor unique in my ignorance. There were others, women swept up in Michael's storm, each of us a casualty of his reckless heart. This chapter takes you through the heart-stopping revelation of his duplicity, the confrontation with a truth that burned hotter than any passion. As Beth and I, his wife and I, joined forces in an uneasy alliance, the stage was set for a showdown that was to be as public as it was personal. The stakes were higher, the fall was steeper, and the path to redemption was fraught with the debris of shattered trust. Chapter 3. His shocking double life discovered, unexpected call from his angry wife. It's odd how life's most profound revelations can come in the quietest moments. There I was, alone in the soft glow of my kitchen, the envelope from Beth laid out before me like a roadmap of betrayal. Each photograph, each snippet of a love letter, not written for me, was a piece of Michael's double life, a life where I was the interloper, not her. The air felt thick with the ghost of every lie he'd told, every promise he'd made. And it was in this heavy silence that the phone rang again, slicing through the stillness like a siren's call. It was Beth, and her voice was different this time, not the controlled calm of our park bench détente, but something raw, something urgent. "He's done it again," she said, and I could hear the strain behind each word. "Another woman, another... you. I thought you should know." I sat down hard, the phone slipping slightly from my grasp. The room spun a bit, not from dizziness, but from the sheer weight of duplicity. How many of us were there? How many lives had he slipped into, only to leave chaos in his wake? Beth's next words were a whisper, but they hit me like a shout. "We can't let him get away with it, Anna. We just can't." It was a rallying cry, one I never expected to hear, let alone heed. But in that moment, something shifted within me. The fog of heartache began to lift, and I saw Michael not as the man I loved, but as the man he truly was. a weaver of lies, a collector of hearts. Beth and I, we made a pact that night. Not one of revenge, but of revelation. We would expose Michael, not through spite, but through the sunlight of truth. It was time for his shadowy existence to be brought into the day, time for the healing to begin for both of us. And as the call ended, I felt an unfamiliar sensation. It was like the first breath after a long dive, both shocking and sweet. I was no longer the other woman. I was an ally in truth, a partner in recovery. The journey from that moment to the morning light was long. I didn't sleep, but I was awake in more ways than one. I was awake to the reality of my own strength, to the power of a shared burden, to the first painful steps of moving forward. As dawn crept through the slats of my blinds, painting stripes of gold across the letter-strewn table, I made my own call. To Michael. It rang once, twice, then his voice, sleepy and unsuspecting. "Anna?" he murmured, and there was a time when that sound would make my heart race. But that time was a lifetime ago, last night, to be precise. "Michael," I said, my voice steady. "It's over, and there's something you should know." I could hear the confusion in his silence, the unasked questions. But I wasn't there to provide answers. I was there to say goodbye. Goodbye to the lies. Goodbye to the half-truths and quarter-loves. Goodbye to Michael. But this wasn't the end of my story. It was a beginning of something real, something true. It was the start of me, Anna, and whoever I was going to become after the last lie had fallen away. And as I hung up the phone, a single ray of sunlight landed on my hand, warming it, reminding me that after every night, no matter how dark, the sun will rise. This is Chapter 3 of a 6-part short story. If you would like to experience your own real-life romance, possibly not exactly like this one, please visit our sponsors in the description below. Stay tuned for Chapter 4. I stood on the threshold of a house that was a shrine to betrayal. Michael's other life laid out in photographs and trinkets, each one a testament to my gullibility. Beth was with me, her presence a silent solidarity in our shared devastation. It was here, in the quiet domesticity of his second home, that I came face to face with the depth of his deception. Pictures of strangers smiled back at me, unaware of the camera's duplicity. Letters in his handwriting declared love to faces I'd never seen. In this chapter, I recount the chilling exploration of Michael's double life and the moment I decided to reclaim my narrative. It's a tale of awakening, of indignation turning into action as I prepare to tear down the facade and expose the truth for all to see. Chapter 4. Bigamy, Bomb and More. My shocking find in his second home. The world has a peculiar way of moving on, indifferent to the little earthquakes shattering individual lives. I found myself in the middle of such an uncaring calm the morning after I'd hung up on Michael. My heart was still beating to the rhythm of confrontation and new-found alliances. Yet outside my window, life went on. People rushing to work, birds chirping as if the day was just any other day. Beth had arranged for me to see Michael's other life. No, not the one with her, but yet another facade. I had agreed, needing to see the extent of his deceit with my own eyes. Perhaps I was also looking for closure, a bookend to place on a chapter of my life that had to end. I drove to the address she'd given me, my grip on the steering wheel tight, my knuckles white. The house was in a neighbourhood that mirrored our own, a place of manicured lawns and lives curated for the outside world to envy. I walked up the path, feeling like an intruder, yet propelled by a need for the truth. The key turned in the lock, a small betrayal in itself. How many women had keys to how many locks of Michael's life? The door swung open, and I stepped into another world. It was a mirror image of our secret meeting places, yet undeniably his. The air smelled of him, a cologne that now felt like a marker of lies. Beth followed me in, her presence a silent support. We walked through the house together, two women united by a common heartache. There were pictures, oh so many pictures, of another woman, another life. Each frame was a dagger, each smiling face a question. How could one man be so many things to so many people? Then, in the study, a shrine to his duplicity, were letters and cards, not just from me or Beth, but from others like us. My hands trembled as I picked them up, reading words of love penned by a man who knew nothing of it. In the silence of that room, with the evidence of Michael's bigamy around us, I felt something shift. The hurt began to harden, the edges of my pain crystallizing into something else. Anger, yes, but also resolve. I wouldn't be a victim of this story. I was the author of my life, and it was time to write a new chapter. Beth's voice broke the quiet. "What will you do?" she asked, her eyes meeting mine in a look that spanned the breadth of human emotion. I placed the letters down, arranging them into a mosaic of deceit. "I'll tell the truth," I said. "I'll tell everyone who needs to know. And then I'll start over." The decision felt like stepping out of a shadow. All this time, I had been living in the half-light of Michael's world, but now I was stepping into the sun. As I left that house, the heaviness in my chest began to lift. It was not joy I felt. No, that was still a far-off promise. But it was the lightness of shedding an unwanted skin. I was no longer the other woman. I was just Anna, hurt, yes, betrayed, undoubtedly, but also free. The drive back was a blur, the road a ribbon unwinding beneath the relentless wheels, taking me away from Michael's house of cards. I had no destination, only a direction, forward. And somewhere along that drive, the sun dipped below the horizon, and the first stars began to prick the evening sky. It was going to be a clear night, a night of infinite possibilities, and I, Anna, was ready to explore them all. This is Chapter 4 of a 6-part short story. We would love to know what you think of the story, so please let us have your comments and feedback. Stay tuned for Chapter 5. The revelation hit me with the subtlety of a sledgehammer. Michael's face, recognizable yet twisted into a stranger's leer, splashed across a police report. Indecent, public, unforgivable. Beth, with her sleuth's tenacity, had unearthed the report and laid it bare before me. Here was a side of Michael that pushed our sordid affair into the realm of the obscene. This chapter is my confrontation with the unsavory truth, a descent into the raw underbelly of his life. With each sordid detail, my resolve hardened. It was time to step out from the shadow of the other woman, to stand in the glaring light of scandal, and to share my story. The lines were drawn, the battle was declared, and I was ready to fight back with a vengeance born of humiliation and rage. Chapter 5. Indecent double life, his illicit restroom encounters. Revealed. Life's funny, isn't it? You think you've hit the bedrock of someone's deceit, only to find out it's just a trapdoor leading to another dark room. That's where I found myself after leaving Michael's house of secrets. I thought I'd uncovered all there was to his lies, but I was about to stumble upon the most unsettling truth yet. It was Beth who found out first. God bless her detective soul. She came to me with a look I'd come to recognize, a mix of rage and victory that said, "We've got him." But what she showed me was far from a victory. It was another sordid chapter in Michael's book of betrayal. The police report she'd somehow gotten her hands on was clinical, impersonal, but the story it told was anything but. Michael, my Michael, or so I had thought, had been caught in lewd acts in public restrooms. my mind recoiled at the thought. The man I'd shared my bed, my body, my dreams with, had been leading a life that would make a nighttime soap opera blush. As I sat there with the cold facts in black and white in front of me, I felt a strange emptiness. The tears wouldn't come. Perhaps I was all cried out. The pain was there, a dull ache, but it was overshadowed by a towering disgust. For the man I'd loved, for the lies I'd lived, for the blind eye I'd turned to all the signs. Beth's hand on mine brought me back to the room, to the moment. "We can't let him do this to anyone else," she said, her voice a steel thread weaving through the fabric of my resolve. "We have to stop him." And so it was decided. We would take the evidence to the police, to his family, to his friends, to anyone who needed to see the man behind the mask. It was no longer just about us, about our broken hearts. It was about righting a wrong, about protecting others from the trap we'd fallen into. But even as I nodded, agreeing to the plan, I knew this wasn't just about justice. It was also about reclaiming my dignity, about washing off the stain of his touch, his kiss, his lies. It was about finding my way back to myself. The following days were a whirlwind. Statements to the police, uncomfortable conversations with people who'd thought they knew Michael, the exposing of a man who was a stranger even to those closest to him. It was hard, the hardest thing I'd ever done. But with each revelation, with each step into the light, I felt a little less of the weight that had been pressing on my chest. One evening, as I sat alone in my living room, the setting sun casting long shadows on the floor, I realized the silence no longer felt oppressive. It was peaceful, the quiet of a battlefield after the fight, when the air is still heavy with the echoes of clashing swords, but the war is over. I'd lost much in this war. I'd lost a love that had never really been mine, a future that had been nothing but a mirage. But as I looked around at the life I was left with, I realized I'd gained something too. I'd gained a voice, loud and clear, that would no longer be silenced by pretty words and empty promises. And as the first star blinked into existence in the twilight sky, I made a promise to myself. Never again would I let someone else write my story. From now on, I was the author, the protagonist, and the hero. This is Chapter 5 of a 6-part short story. If you are enjoying this story, why not subscribe to the Romance Diaries, where you can enjoy other stories of love, romance, heartache, revenge, cheating and betrayal, and by clicking on the notification bell at the same time we can let you know every time we bring out a new video. Please stay tuned for the final chapter, Chapter 6. The final chapter awaited, and it was time for the curtain call on Michael's twisted performance. I had come full circle, from the naivete of love's first blush to the steely resolve of a woman scorned. As I faced him for the last time, my heart was a fortress, impervious to his pleading eyes and trembling lips. This was the moment of my emancipation, the day I declared my independence from the web of his lies. In this chapter, I take you through my final goodbye to Michael, a farewell laced with empowerment and the promise of a new dawn. It was my turn to script the ending, to deliver the coup de grace to our toxic bond. And as I walked away, the chains of his deceit fell away, clattering into the silence of the past. Chapter 6. Facing down my cheating husband, my revenge on his twisted love games. The day of reckoning came with a sunrise that painted the sky in hues of justice and retribution. I stood before the mirror, not just to dress for the occasion, but to talk to the woman who stared back at me. She'd been through the storm, baptized by betrayal, and now she was ready to face the architect of her pain. It wasn't revenge I was after. That word implies a desire to inflict pain for pain's sake, and that wasn't what drove me. It was about standing in my truth, about showing Michael that I wasn't just a footnote in his sordid narrative. I was the headline, the main story, the teller of tales. Michael had requested to meet, a last-ditch effort to sway the narrative, no doubt. I agreed, not for him, but for me. I needed this closure, a full stop at the end of a sentence that had run on too long. We met at a neutral place, a park bench that had borne witness to many a secret shared and kiss stolen. He was there before me, the lines of worry etched into his brow, a stark contrast to the carefree face I once knew. "Anna," he began, his voice the familiar melody that once made my heart sing. But now, it was just noise. "Save it, Michael," I interrupted. The power of cutting him off was intoxicating. "I'm not here to listen to more lies. I'm here to tell you that it's over. Really over. And to give you this." I handed him an envelope, much like the one Beth had given me, filled with the police reports, the testimonies, the evidence of his double life. His hands shook as he took it, the finality of the gesture not lost on him. "Anna, please," he implored, but I raised my hand, stopping him mid-plea. "No, Michael, I gave you more chances than you deserved. I loved you more than you were worth. Now, I'm taking back my life." I turned then, leaving him with his envelope of truths, the portrait of a man undone by his own doings. I didn't look back. Some part of me wanted to see him, to witness the crumbling of his facade, but I knew some sights were better left to the imagination. Walking away, I felt the chapters of my life turning, a new page ready to be written. I thought of Beth, of the other women, of the lives entangled with a man who was less than we all deserved. We were a tapestry of strength and resilience, woven together by the thread of his deceit. As I reached my car, I allowed myself one final glance at the park bench. He was still there, head in hands, a figure of loneliness and regret. I felt a twinge of something, pity, maybe, or just the last vestiges of a love that was never truly mine. Driving away, the road stretched out before me, not a path to an unknown destination, but a runway to a future I was ready to embrace. I had love to find, stories to write, a life to live. And this time, I would be the one in the driver's seat. The horizon called to me, a siren song of hope and new beginnings. And as the first chapter of the rest of my life began, I knew one thing for certain. I was finally free.